Cooking pork belly can be one of those things that is just a little bit tricky, because what we want to achieve is beautiful crispy skin and nice tender pork. And it can leave you asking the question, well, how do we get that? And actually, with a very few simple tips and tricks, it's not actually that difficult. So I'm going to guide you through a few steps that'll help you achieve perfect pork belly with crispy skin every single time. So for tip number one, we're going to talk about selecting the meat. So first of all, when choosing your pork belly, you want to try and go for something that's free range from your local butcher if possible, or if not, you just need to buy the best cut of meat that you can afford. And what you're looking for is a decent layer of fat under the skin and some marbling of fat throughout. Now, people often think of belly pork as a fatty cut of meat, which it is, but if it's cooked correctly, a lot of that fat will render out and you'll end up with meat that is absolutely delicious because of all of that beautiful flavour from the fat, and it'll just melt in your mouth. And the next important tip is that you want the pork to be as dry as possible. So if it's been in a vac pack or wrapped in cling film, you want to unwrap that and pat it dry. And then the best way to do it is to leave it uncovered in the fridge the day before you cook it, or if not, at least a couple of hours before, because that just helps to dry out the skin. There's no moisture on there, and dry out the meat, because this is essential for absolutely delicious crispy crackling. And tip number three is scoring the skin. You can ask your butcher to do this, which is probably the easiest way because it can be quite tough. Otherwise, you need a really sharp knife, or you can use a DIY Stanley knife because those blades are super sharp, but make sure it's clean, not one you've used for your DIY. And you can also set the blade length, so you're making sure you're not cutting into the meat and you're just cutting into the skin and the fat. I don't have one, mine is currently dirty from the DIY, so I'm going to use one of my sharp chef knives. And there's no right or wrong way to do this. You just want to put some nice cuts into the meat, well, into the skin, and this is going to help when you add some seasoning. The seasoning is going to be able to get right in there. It's going to help the heat get into there to render down the fat and make sure that skin really crisps up nicely. So we go ahead and we just make cuts into the skin and the fat. And you want to make these cuts roughly around 1 centimetre apart, kind of more the merrier really. And really focus on just cutting into the skin and the fat and avoiding going through into that meat. If it happens, it's not the end of the world, don't worry about it too much. And then you can see there, got some nice cuts going in to the skin. We're going to talk about seasoning in a moment, but first I want to preheat the oven and set up my tray ready for cooking, because once I add that seasoning and add the salt, it's going to start drawing out moisture, and I don't want that to happen before I start cooking it. So we need to preheat the oven nice and hot for the first stage of cooking. So I'm preheating mine to 220 degrees Celsius, but don't worry about how hot you do it really, as long as it's nice and hot. Anywhere between 220 degrees Celsius and 250 degrees Celsius will be absolutely fine. So I've got a baking tray here and some vegetables, and this is to create a trivet for our meat to sit on. And this is just going to allow the fat to drip away from the meat, so it's not sitting in all of that fat, and also for the heat to get underneath and all around for even cooking. Now the vegetables you use are not massively important. I've got a couple of carrots, some onions and a bulb of garlic here. You can use whatever you've got hanging around in the bottom of your fridge. If it's parsnips, celeriac, you know, anything, you can put it on the bottom, and it's just to raise it up. But also you can make a beautiful gravy from it as well, if that's what you want to do. So all I'm going to do is simply cut the onions in half. I'm leaving the skins on, I'm not worrying about that. And then you just want to spread them out on your tray. And do exactly the same with your carrots. I'm not going to worry about peeling them. I'm just going to roughly chop them into quite big chunks. So it's just going to help raise that meat off the bottom of the tray. And when it comes to the seasoning, I like to just keep it really simple. I like just salt and pepper. But you can add other things. You could add some fennel seeds, coriander seeds, and grind it up with your salt and rub that in. And that just creates beautiful flavour. But I just want to enhance the flavour of the pork. So salt and black pepper works absolutely fine for me. So you want to season your pork all over, quite generously. Make sure you get it all on the sides, everywhere, and then just rub it in a little bit, just to make sure it's getting right in there. And then on the skin, you want to put it on and rub it in to those cuts that we made earlier on. Now with that done, you want to take your pork and then just place it on top of those vegetables, just like that, and then it's going to go straight into that hot oven. We now leave it to cook at that temperature for 45 minutes. I'm going to have a little clean down and we'll come back to it shortly. So 45 minutes at 220 degrees C has now finished, and we're going to have a look and see how our pork is doing. You can already hear it sizzling away and it looks absolutely beautiful. And just listen to that, the skin is already nice and crispy. So at this stage we're just going to place it back in and we're going to turn the heat down now to 160 degrees Celsius, and we're going to cook that now for a further 3 to 4 hours. So we've got about 40 minutes to half an hour left on our pork, and I'm going to show you how to make a nice quick little apple sauce to go with it. So take some apples. I'm using Granny Smith apples for this recipe because they've got enough tartness and enough sweetness to make a really tasty sauce. You could use Bramley apples, but you might need to add a little extra sugar, or you could use any other eating apples that you've got to hand that need using up. But my preference is these Granny Smiths, and I am just going to peel them first. And then just cut them in half and then into quarters, and you can just cut the core away. And now we're just going to place these apple pieces onto the same tray as the pork in the oven and let them bake slowly for the rest of the cooking time. Wow, this pork looks absolutely fantastic and it's now ready. So while we let it rest, listen to that crackling. While we let it rest, we're going to make the apple sauce from these baked apples that we put in earlier on. So now that I've blended the apples, I'm just going to give them a little taste. And that's going to tell us if we need to add any more sweetness, any more sugar, any salt or anything like that. For me, I don't want any more sugar in there. Roasting the apples has created a nice sweetness. And I'm just going to add like a tiny pinch of salt. And one of the best little tips is just to add a little bit of butter. There's not much, there's probably about between 5 and 10 grams there. I'm just going to add that through and then stir it through. And what that'll do is just create a nice glossiness and richness and just finish that sauce off nicely. And that'll be the perfect accompaniment for our pork. And you can just see how crispy that crackling is and how tender the pork is. Just pulls apart. Beautiful. So there we go, that's how I make the perfect pork belly with crispy crackling. And I just need is the key word, to give this a little try. My favourite thing to do is get a piece of the crackling and a little bit of this beautiful roasted apple sauce, and then just get stuck in. For me, that's absolute perfection. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.